Comair's review of its results for the first 4 months of the year to December 2011 states that the airline operator expects its headline earnings and earnings per share to show a loss for the reporting period. This was due primarily to significant cost increases, including a 70% increase in the fees of Airports Company South Africa, high oil prices, and a weakening rand. So Ron, the outlook really not looking too good on Comair. We'll touch on those extraneous variables a little later. Let's just start first with Mr. Novik's departure from Comair. He was a joint CEO with Eric Venter for 5.5 years, and his departure comes just a month after One Time said goodbye to its CEO, Glenn Osmond, who led One Time for 8 years. Could you give us a sense on what's happening in terms of leadership in the airline industry?
Well, let's look at Comair as a start there. First of all, this joint CEO position, I think, probably wasn't tenable. As the pressures built up, as you said, with high oil prices, high airport taxes, low disposable income on the part of the consumer, another little airline called Mango, which has been funded by the taxpayers and the government, rather unfair, and the like. Things have come to a bit of a grinding halt. Looking at Gideon Novik as an individual, he's brought a paradigm of change to the airline industry via Kulula. You're having bookings through CompuTicket, online and the like. He's brought in hotels and the car hire with Euro car hire. And if you book a package, you actually get some significant discounts by booking Comair. You can book your car through Comair, your Euro car at a discount, get your hotels at a discount. So it's a very, very competitive package. This is how they've managed to grow. Eric Venter, the way I understand it, the other joint CEO, is a very hands-on guy with airline experience, whereas Gideon Novik is more a guy with entrepreneurial flair, marketing, new ideas, and sort of stuff like that. So perhaps with all these challenges, the time has come now that Comair has really come of age to look at the challenges in terms of upgrading. The fleet replacement is a very, very, very substantial amount in terms of cash funding and in terms of depreciation. So maybe for the time being, Gideon has done his thing, perhaps a little bit controversial in terms of the Durban airport and the like, wanting to introduce direct flights from Durban to London, which in this sort of market is quite a challenge. The airline passenger industry is not growing, so perhaps more time for a hands-on aviation man to be taking the helm of the industry.
Thanks, Ron. Wikus, Ron and I are obviously mentioning a number of the challenges I mentioned in the introduction: overcapacity, there's new entrants in the SA market in particular, Velvet Sky, and the expected entrance of Santago Airlines, which is the SA taxi industry's foray into aviation, airport charges increasing by 70%, fuel prices rising by 20%. So these are factors that are really outside of the control of Comair. Looking internally, they want to focus on their systems, their processes, new aircraft, new routes. The single CEO strategy, will this expedite this inward focus and turn the company around?
I think that it is easier if you have one person in charge in the cost-cutting arena. I think that expansion is a different thing from consolidation, and I think that it is a question of having to consolidate and going for the person with, where we would say the fancy stuff that actually expanded it up to here is in place. What we can now do is to say, let's actually consolidate, let's cut costs, let's actually make sure that we run our aircraft as efficiently as possible. So I guess there's merit in that. In the end, the value is created by expanding, not by cost cutting. Cost cutting can take you through the hard time.
Because we're seeing the new CEO, Eric Venter, responding to some of these pressures by saying that Kulula.com is going to be going into a hybrid model where passengers are going to be charged differentiated ticket prices. Now, this is the same thing we're seeing in Australia with their low-cost area, Version Blue, introducing business class. The hybrid model in Kulula, what is your take on that?
I think that it actually introduces complexity into something that should rely on simplicity. So I wouldn't really be very chuffed about that. I think that there are business people flying Kulula, but they're flying it for the low prices and the simplicity of it. So I don't think that you can really expand your offering in that way. You should actually follow a different route. I'm not really excited about that.
Just touching on their operations in Africa, they had a joint venture with Solenta Aviation, and that's an operator of smaller gauge aircraft, and they wanted to access smaller lucrative routes both in South Africa and Southern Africa. But we saw Comair exiting Mozambique, so clearly that strategy not working very well because of limitations and flight frequency. What is their outlook in terms of operations in Southern Africa?
I think that they're looking now that, you know, when you're expanding into Africa, there's often some school fees to be paid. You go in there, you test the market. If it doesn't work, you withdraw then. I think they're probably looking to consolidate and then re-evaluating what those markets are in Africa. I think they do fly to parts of East Africa, Malawi and places like that. So it's, you know, just sit down, consolidate, reevaluate the whole situation before you go on another expansion plan.
So for you then, Ron, is Comair flying high or crashing down? Hot or not? Give us your vote.
I think it's potentially warm, and I think we can touch in greater detail on this when we come to the Bidvest scenario.
Okay. We'll leave it for Bidvest then. Wikus, could you give us your vote, hot or not, for Comair?
No, I don't. I'm quite cool on Comair. I think that it's an industry under pressure and a company under pressure, so I'd rather go with something with a bit more excitement.
So Wikus saying not hot, looking for a little bit more excitement. It's an industry under pressure. Moving on to Bidvest now. Is it a plane? Is it a bird? Well, it could be a harbinger of doom. Bidvest announced the sale of half of its interest in Mumbai International Airport in October. And really, Ron, they said that they expected a positive impact of about 400 million rand from the sale of Mumbai International Airport, but clearly signaling that they're not very bullish on the aviation sector. Now, when we mentioned Comair, they hold 25% of their stake in Comair. Chances are they're not going to be looking to boost that stake anytime soon.
In the short term, maybe not. Let's look at the man behind Bidvest, who's in the driving wheel.
Brian.
This man is a brilliant, deep, long-term strategic thinker then. My feel is that he's an opportunistic investor. Opportunistic in the sense of being able to turn around a company which is under pressure. That's where I think he is. Now, if you look at Comair, they need a daddy with big pockets, deep pockets, Why do they need that? Because they're upgrading their fleet at enormous cost. It's a couple of billion rand. In the guise of Bidvest, who are under-geared, under-borrowed at this particular point in time, that will give the financial underpin, as Wikus said, to go on expansion at a later stage. What they're doing is they're consolidating. Ultimately, I believe they will be looking to expansion. Africa is a growth market. They will find their niches in the market in Africa in due course and expand. More and more people are flying. They've got two great brands, not only the Kulula brand, but also the British Airways brand as well, which could be used to fly maybe to places like Melbourne in due course, to places like from Durban to London there. But they do need, this would be part, I believe, of Joffy's long-term strategy in terms of expansion. Let's
come on to that a little bit later when we talk about the future of conglomerates, because surely there has to be a limit as to how big you can get. But Wikus, let's come to you now and discuss the lack of a dilutive impact on the BEE deal that they concluded. It wasn't really demonstrated in August when Bidvest sold 1.6 billion rand to Dinatha, which is their BEE partner, for the repurchase of half of their shares. Has this undermined Bidvest's empowerment credentials, or is it because equity ownership is no longer crucial?
I think that what you have to do is you've got to make sure that your deals work. So for your deals to work and for your partners not to be embarrassed, sometimes money has to flow back as well. So I think that it has undermined the current BEE status, obviously, because they've got fewer black partners. But I think, again, Bidvest takes a very long view on most things. So I think that it is actually to accommodate their partners rather than because they wanted less BEE investment.
Ron, let's come back to you now. Obviously, Bidvest is highly diversified. They've got a very large market cap as well. I just want your take on the future of the conglomerate, because as I said, there needs to be a limit as to how big you can get. Are we starting to anticipate possibly the unbundling of some assets, given the performance of their underlying investments?
I think one of the most significant things that has happened the last month is putting a value to the food. At about a 17 or 18 PE was the indicated value of the food side, which was equivalent to about 35 billion. The market cap of Bidvest here is about 52.25 odd billion, which shows that there is a lot of unlocked value. Looking at the geographies in which they operate in food, Eastern Europe, Western Europe, the UK, which all are obviously a bit flat for the time being. China is starting to pump, Singapore, Australia, New Zealand and places like that. And slowly they're increasing their web in Asia, particularly into Southeast Asia. So I think there's a lot of potential. As food inflation globally becomes more and more of a problem, so we're going to see the benefits flowing through. In addition, the weaker rand will obviously help boost Bidvest's profits from a global point of view. Their offshore contribution, if I can remember, is probably about 30, 35, 37 odd percent. So that then gives a value on food. Going to the industrial side, it is highly, highly diversified. My feeling is that what they want to do, they've got a new strategy which Brian Joffe unveiled in terms of bulking up and restructuring the non-food operations in South Africa. To me, they're already in aviation, Bidvest passenger services at the airport and the like. Comair, obviously being in aviation, would fit into that. Looking at the comments of what they've got on car hire, they've got budget. If you had that big switch from Eurocar into budget, that will bulk up that side of things. They're also in holiday and travel and the like. Those sort of things that could add critical mass. As I say, I think Brian Joffe is an opportunistic. He is starting to build up his stake. He's going to get synergy and flow through values over a period, not of 3 or 6 months, but of year, 2 years, 3 years.
Clearly quite a long-term play, and Ron mentioning that Mr. Joffe is very opportunistic. But are you not concerned, Wikus, around the fact that Bidvest has become so synonymous with Mr. Joffe, that the day that he decides to exit the company, a lot of things could be shaken up?
That obviously is a concern, but Mr. Joffe is, as far as I know, very healthy, and he's still quite young. If you compare him to someone like Warren Buffett, there's really no indication that he wants to stop. So I do think that it is very strongly coupled, and you remember Imperial, which was also something that was very strongly coupled to Bill Lynch, and what happened to that is it got unbundled afterwards. And I think with Mr. Joffe we'll see the same. As long as Mr. Joffe is there, he actually believes in the conglomerate model. He certainly is a firm believer in that. So he's got no ambition to unbundle Bidvest. He has an ambition to make his capital work extremely hard. But he's been very, very smart in terms of getting very, very good management into all of the companies that he owns, and actually getting the synergies between the companies without creating a big infrastructure around it. So he's run it in a very smart way, and I don't think we should expect him to do it any other way in the next 10 years.
And obviously there will be a very good succession plan in any case in the event of his exit. Let's just come on these SENS announcements. I noticed with some interest a number of sales by the directors. Now these were not huge amounts, they were generally under 2 million rand, but the biggest sale was 3.8 million rands worth of shares by Mr. Joffe himself on the 30th of November, which is obviously possibly something to sneeze at given his worth. But just the sale of shares by directors, is it to rebalance portfolios? Is it a bit of profit taking? Would we be more alarmed if the amounts were bigger?
We would certainly be much more alarmed if the amounts were bigger. What tends to happen is that if you are invested in a fast-growing company like Bidvest, what tends to happen is that Bidvest becomes very large in your portfolio, whereas you should also have a diversified portfolio to make provision for your own pension, etc. So anyone, no matter how big your share in any company, you should have some other investments as well, and you need to keep rebalancing those things. So the better your company does, actually, the more the need comes to do some diversification. What is a problem is if that diversification is sudden and large, because what that implies is there may be some loss of belief in the company. But I believe that, you know, if you're talking about a couple of million rands here and there in someone like Mr. Joffe's portfolio, I think that's small fry. I don't think it's anything to be worried about.
Hot or not, Wikus, we'll press for time. I need to get your vote on
Bidvest. Fantastic. I'll back Brian Joffe any day.
You'll back Brian Joffe any day. Ron, I'm assuming you're going to go with the same vote?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. You love Bidvest.